I mean, this had been expected, these coronavirus infection rates that are spiking yet again in the US. It shouldn't really surprise anyone, but it's coming pretty thick and fast, isn't it now?
Well, that's right, Pete. In fact, everyone was talking about the so-called second wave in October, November. What we're seeing now is spiking across in parts of the states where it hadn't spiked before. We're seeing some pretty terrible figures here. I mean, in the last 24 hours, there were 36,000 infections in the US. Now, that is the second highest since the pandemic started. Quite extraordinary. And so we've had, there's now 33 states that have had a trend upwards in coronavirus infections. And so what we've seen is three things coming from this. We've seen some states now trying to put their reopening plans on hold or delaying them completely. We are seeing New York, which of course was the epicenter of the virus only a month or two ago, calling for quarantine for travellers who are coming in from the hotspots like Florida and down south and across the west. And we're even seeing the European Union talking about banning travellers from America. So things are really flowing on from this. And there is quite a bit of alarm here. Of course, Anthony Fauci, the infectious diseases expert, 24 hours ago also said he was very concerned this was not under control at the moment.
And I think you just mentioned it there too, Cam, on the West Coast. So numbers are really taking off in California too, right?
They are. They're taking off in California. It's around the south as well. Texas, all those southern states, Alabama, Mississippi. Florida is the hot one, 5,500 infections alone in the last 24 hours. The Carolinas are also taking off. Interestingly, these are actually, a lot of these, apart from California, are Republican states. Now, recall, early in the coronavirus pandemic, they were Democrat states. So, in fact, you're seeing a swapping over from blue to red states now.
This could be a real problem for the election. Couldn't it? I mean, if this goes, and I'm assuming here that these are states where relaxations to restrictions have been put in place. I mean, if it keeps going the way it is, it could spell some big problems for the president.
Look, I think it really could, because Donald Trump is banking his re-election, Pete, on the economy recovering to some degree before November the 3rd, before the actual polling date. And this wave of infections we're now seeing, the fresh spikes, really makes this much less likely that we're going to get any sort of serious economic recovery before November. So this does pose a problem for the president, absolutely.
And just for those who might not be aware, where is it at the US at the moment, Cam, when it comes to foreign travellers? For example, let's say someone from Sydney wants to fly into LA or anywhere in the US. Are there widespread quarantine measures in place, or is it all still pretty lax?
Pete, it's a hodgepodge, frankly.
Right.
It's much more lax than Australia. I mean, you're seeing nothing like the sort of discipline in Australia. When I tell friends here what happens to Australians coming into Australia with the enforced 2 weeks quarantine, they're quite shocked. Here, the quarantines are only recommended. They're never enforced. You don't get police meeting you at the airport, that sort of stuff. So you can fly into the US if you can find a plane. There's not many of them. And you can then travel from that point on. You're supposed to self-quarantine a lot, but it's voluntary.
Right. OK, just a quick one before we go, Cam. Michael Flynn, a win for Donald Trump this morning?
Yes, a win for Donald Trump. The saga of Michael Flynn, former national security correspondent, advisor for Donald Trump, the higher court has recommended that perjury charges against him be dropped completely. It's ordered the lower court to do so. It's been caught in a legal limbo for a little while, but this is a victory for Donald Trump and, of course, for Michael Flynn, who's gone through about 3 years of torture on this front.